Good morning. My name is Chris. I'm one of the pastors here at Capstone, and we are in our second week of our Kingdom Stories series, and you are in for a treat today because today we are going to hear from four couples who are going to come share just how God has been working in their lives over the past 4 or 5 years to get them to this point to where they are going to try to have kingdom impact. Back in January, we started our Advanced 2025 program, and one of the last things we talked about was increasing kingdom impact. And so today is just the stories of how that's going to happen. So I'm just going to get over there and sit down, but I'm going to ask for my boys to come on up, and I'll introduce them, and they're going to share their stories. So first off, we got Stephen Hawkins. I've known Stephen forever, seeing him decked out in his white tuxedo at senior prom, so let's go. Glenn kills beavers in my pond, and so he's like family, so here we go. Glenn's going to come on in, and then JP. Laura used to babysit JP when he was 4 years old, playing Black Crowes on the air guitar, and I married Nick Cox, and I guess his wife too, 12 years ago? How many years? 11 years ago. So I've known these guys for a long time. They've been a big part of my family and my life, and so this is something that's just really means a lot to me. To be able to stand up here and hear them and see the life that God has transformed in their lives. And so, like I said, this is about them. This is about their story. It's about what God has been working in their lives. And so I'm going to let Stephen start sharing just his story, and then we're going to kind of work our way down the line here. And just listen up. This is God's going to work. Let's go.
Good morning. I'm Stephen Hawkins, and I'm going to share my short story version of addiction and recovery. I was born and raised here, grew up in church at Simpsonville First Baptist, went to Hillcrest High School, and was introduced to drugs and alcohol and started partying recreationally. Went to college at USC in Columbia, where it continued on. I didn't have to answer to any parents, and I was like, man, this is great. You know, I can go party as much as I want to. So I moved back home, and it continued to be a part of my life, a way of life for me. And through my 20s, into my 30s, when I was 33, I have epilepsy, and I've had seizures in the past, but when I was 33, I had a bad seizure and fell and hit my head, which resulted in having to have brain surgery. And most of my seizures have been while I was using drugs and abusing alcohol, and this should have been the last straw, and it should have come to a screeching halt. But I used it as an excuse and a crutch to try and get as much pain medication, because I loved it so much, as I could, and they just kept feeding them to me, and I was like, man, this is awesome. I love this. And so I had always grew up knowing the Lord, but not really living the life, having a personal walk with Jesus day in and day out. And I feel like I started making a turn. Nick and JP started coming over about once a week. We were talking about Jesus, and me and my wife started coming here, but I was still getting high, and I was, trying to hide it. Nobody knows, and so I decided that I wanted to get baptized, and I was excited about it. I was jacked up, and of course I was high, and I was telling people here, hey man, I'm gonna get baptized. Nick's gonna do it. And little did I know, after church one Sunday, I came home, and my wife and Nick and Wimbo and a couple other close family members sat me down and said, hey, something's going on, we know, and you got to quit doing it. You need to go get help and quit this mess. And my wife said, or I'm packing up and taking the kids, and we're gone. And I never hesitated. I was like, I need help. So I went to rehab at Black Bear in Helen, Georgia. And that's the first time in my life where I really hit my knees and surrendered to the Lord and said, God, I need you. I need your help in my life. I can't continue to do this. Just work in and through me, God. Help me get clean. I just want to be obedient and do whatever it is you have in store for me. I just want to do what you want me to do. So I got clean, came home. We started getting a little bit involved in the church. I helped Nick with Edge a little bit. I started going to a Wednesday night men's group over at Brian's house. Just that stuff helped me stay on the straight and narrow, and I hadn't been clean long. And Chris we were part of the Bartron community group, and Chris came up to me and was like, hey man, there's this guy that's struggling, and his story kind of reminds me of yours. His name's Glenn, and he wasn't there that night, but Heather came to me just in a mess, and I saw my wife all over again, like when we went through it. And so I'll pass it on to Glenn and let him tell you some of his story.
Good morning. So I am the Glenn he's speaking of. A little bit about me. I am an only child, originally from Newberry, South Carolina. My parents had a very healthy marriage. I had a pretty comfortable life. I've grown up in the church. It was our stories are very, very similar, and I want to be clear about this. There's only a certain amount of time we have up here today, so you're getting, for those of y'all that are old enough to know what Cliff Notes are, you're getting the Cliff Notes version of the Cliff Notes. So, just like Steve was saying, I grew up, my later years in high school, we were partying, went off to college, did my share of partying and being sociable. Never had an issue with anything at that point. Pretty strong-willed guy, so anything that ever started tugging on me, I knocked it down pretty quick. So I guess in my late 30s, 40s is when it came to hit me. It started with a shoulder injury. It got to almost where I couldn't use my shoulder, prolonged periods of pain pills. And I want to stop here too, because it just happens, we're talking about addiction. It just so happens that us up here, it involves chemicals or drugs. Addiction comes in many different faces, whether it's pornography, gambling, anything that you put before anything else is an addiction. So to get back on track, about 4.5 years ago, we were shopping for churches. I hate to use that term, but we were. One of my daughter's best friend's parents invited us here. And they spoke, if anybody was at the leadership summit last night, about how much effort that a lot of people don't realize goes into making the least little thing happen around here. And they talked about being welcoming and making you feel comfortable when you walk in the door. Well, that's exactly what Chris did to me. And I'm in sales, so I don't really meet a stranger, but I could tell from the majority of people that I spoke with that day that everybody in here was real, real. And so it started there. I got more on fire about Jesus. I was going through my addiction. Obviously, that was a big tug of war within myself. Made it a point that I was going to quit. I was going to beat what I was dealing with, and I didn't. I needed help, and it wasn't just help from my wife or my friends. I literally cried out. I hit my knees in our sunroom. I was there by myself one afternoon and screamed like a maniac, yelling at God and begging for him to come in my life. So that's where it all started. People here surrounded us, loved on us, and didn't hardly know us. We were literally maybe been coming for a month or two. And just the love that was shown, it kind of got us through. And like I said, this is the Cliff Notes version of the details, but addiction gets really, really dark. It gets dark, it gets lonely. You do a lot of stuff that you would never in a million years picture yourself doing. And having this conversation with my wife, when it first came to light about money missing, you know, I was expecting her just to honestly just throw a right hook and knock me out. And she was very, very upset. But it was about 30 or 45 seconds later, she just grabbed me and hugged me. And at that point, I felt a lot of weight shed off of me. And it took a little while after that point. And, you know, I've had some hard conversations, but I've been doing great. We all have. That was, like I said, 4 years ago. I wasn't chomping at the bit. You know, we were speaking about being urged to move to help people. Well, I'm not really I want to help somebody, but I'm not on fire to start a recovery program. Stephen said it last service, but he didn't want to relive his worst time of his life over again. Him and I talked, and that would just be selfish. That would be selfish. We can handle that to extend help to others. But it left me to a very hard conversation because I had to take my almost 13-year-old daughter out for ice cream and explain to her, again, a Cliff Notes version of what we went through and the way everything fell into place and lined up. I'm a numbers guy. I believe in coincidence. But there is absolutely no way with any of us here the way things laid out was a coincidence. But after I told Sarah Grace what she was going to be seeing this Sunday and why, she was very shocked. But right after that, she hugged my neck and said, "Can I help?" So I'm just going to stop there because I can ramble on for days, but we'll try to get our full testimonies with a little more graphic details in the mix and available to you pretty soon. JP?
I just want to say I'm thankful to be up here today with these guys, and I'm thankful that every person is here in this room. I grew up in Fountain Inn in a loving Christian home. Grew up in the Methodist church and then ended up at the First Baptist Church. Nobody in my family had ever dealt with drug addiction or alcohol except for my dad. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old. And so going into late middle school, early high school years, I was involved in youth group. And I was on fire for God, and I told myself that I will never be in a situation that my dad was in. I'll never touch anything, and that's not going to be me. Fast forward a year or two into high school, and peer pressure, it got the best of me. I started smoking marijuana, and I didn't really stop. As high school went on, it just increased more and more. And then I got to college, and my sophomore year of college, one of my best friends from Hillcrest passed away in a car accident. I was actually with Chris at Awanata on a youth retreat, and he had to deliver that news to me. And that was the worst news I'd ever gotten in my entire life. And I was angry at God. About 4 months before that, I had found out that my other best friend, Johnny Burry, had been diagnosed with acute leukemia. And so I knew I needed God, but I was angry at God. And my love and enjoyment for smoking marijuana just got worse and worse. And so I just continued my way doing what I wanted to do. and I was treating my pain, my depression, my anxiety with something other than a relationship with Jesus. And so I graduated college and got married to my wife, Megan, started my job, and I smoked weed every day. Fast forward to May of 2020 after COVID. It was our first Sunday back here at Capstone, and thought it was going to be a good Sunday. I came home from church, and about 10 minutes after I got home, Megan and 12 other family members and friends walked in my door, and I said, why in the heck are you guys here? But I knew why they were there. I knew why they were there. And God let things happen the way they did with Steve and with Glenn and our community group, because he had a plan for that for me as well. Megan started talking and going through just why something had to change for me. And I basically stopped her and said, look, you don't have to say anything else. I will go get help that I need. That was the day after my birthday. I had also put my dog of 12 years down the Saturday before that Sunday. And Nick was our driver. Nick drove all three of us. So Nick, I can remember telling Nick on the way to Helen, Georgia, to Black Bear, that this was going to be the worst birthday of my entire life. I was so I was so upset with myself for living alive for so long. Felt like I'd let so many people down. I was so ashamed. But at the end of your treatment at Black Bear, they give you the opportunity to tell a transformation speech in front of the whole community, in front of the counselors. And that day that I stood before everybody on a Thursday, before I came home, I told them the same story, that when I left to go to Black Bear, I thought it was the worst birthday that I would ever remember in my entire life. But by the time I was ready to go home, that will be the best birthday that I've ever had in my entire life. And nothing will ever change that, because that's the day that I started my new life. And I just want to say that there's no shame in Jesus. There's no condemnation in Jesus. And if you're surrounded by people who truly love Jesus and they live their life like Jesus calls them to, nobody's ever going to worry what you're dealing with. They're not going to push you to the side and have bad feelings about you because you're being honest and asking for help. That was one of the most scariest things when I left. Was like, what's Chris going to think about this? What is Walt going to think? What is my family going to think? And through conversations with Megan while I was there, I knew that things were okay. I knew that there was nobody mad at me. I knew that there was nobody that was upset with me. Nobody was going to ask me why. They just wanted me to be okay, and they wanted me to get help that I needed. And so I guess that's about it.
All right, so I'm going to recap, okay? So Stephen had an addiction, needed help. He Leslie helped, got Nick and Wimbo to come help, took him to Black Bear, took him to rehab. Heather comes to me and says, Glenn needs help. I was like, I don't know what to do, but I know somebody who does. Leslie and Steven, get them. Wimbo and Nick come. Nick takes Glenn to rehab. Then fast forward a year later. All right, Megan, I need help with JP. All right, don't worry. These guys know how to do an intervention. So here they come, and they get these guys, and then Nick takes JP to Black Bear. So these guys have been through it, and this is this community, and this is what it's about, is them being together. So Nick, what what kind of advice would you give someone? When you say like you were there for these guys, like your friend's going through addiction or something like that, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's going through that?
So for me, nothing special about me except I'm good friends with these guys, but really it's just the obedience, God. The first one, whenever I knew we were going to have to go talk to Steve, it was so hard because, we talked to some specialists about how you should go about, with somebody with an addiction. And if you give them like a day to think about it, there's that fight or flight reaction. So they may just kind of take off, because at that point, the addict is almost in control. And so I knew what needed to be done, but I didn't want to do it because there again, how do you backstab? How do you go and tell your best friend that you've been lying and that you got to get out of here? You need help. How do you do that when there too? He was supposed to get baptized that very Sunday, and we were like, no, we're just going to push it off a week. So he's still thinking he's getting baptized, and it's like, buddy, you're going to be gone for a couple of weeks. But just, the obedience of, Lord, why are you putting me in this position, But there again, looking back, it's like, you look at the fruit from these guys, and it was simple obedience. I mean, it was hard, but there again, you look at the fruit that these guys produce and are continuing to produce, and we're up here on stage now sharing their stories because of the 180s that they've done, and so if you are a friend of somebody that is struggling, or that are struggling, guys, sometimes for them it's hard to actually admit it, and so you need to be the one to call them out, maybe too, but stand up for them, fight for them, as hard as it is, and don't be scared of what could come, because there again, if God's ordained it, He's gonna take care of the rest. And it's awesome to see. I was just a driver, but the future is so bright. Especially these guys.
Yeah, and just so thank you guys for sharing your story and just the humility that it takes to stand up on this stage or sit on the stage and share what God's been doing, and just the rock bottom that your life was at that point, and just that God's going to use that. But that's not it. That's not the whole story. God's still doing a lot more through them, but especially through their much better halves. And so I'm going to ask the ladies to come up, and they're going to also share a little bit about what God is doing through their lives and through this whole thing. There's two parts to this. One is the addiction and people who are struggling with that, but it's also the community aspect of this, and that none of them could have gotten through this without each other. And so Leslie is excited to be up here to share. God started this whole thing with Leslie, which is awesome. And so she loves to be on stage and talking. And so here she goes. She's going to kind of share what's happened since all these guys have gotten back from recovery, and just what God's doing now through their group. So all yours, Leslie. Take it away.
I am not excited to be up here. And first service, I accidentally threw my phone down and has my notes on it. So here we go. I'm Leslie Hawkins, Stephen's wife, and obviously after you hear their stories, I've lived through addiction as a spouse. and seen the struggles and seen the bridges burned and seen the heartache that comes along with that. We were lucky enough to have Nick and Wimbo as our best friends really since 6th grade. And they just kind of stuck it out with us through the long haul, through brain surgery, through kids. And they invited us to Capstone. Wimbo kind of knew there were some issues going on, and she, stayed by us and stuck it out, like I said. And got to a point where I was lucky enough that I was able to call them and say, something's wrong, something's got to give, we've got to figure this out. And I had a community come around me. But like I said, when you're in addiction, the addict part does take over and does a lot of things that are dark, like Glenn said, that burn bridges and that force people away from you. And, being in this community, I realized that there is a huge need for community with addicts and in the addiction world, and because a lot of people don't have that. And so probably this past December, it was really weird, but I started having a dream, and during my dream, I would immediately wake up in the middle of the night, and it was extremely clear that we were supposed to take a next step and provide some for the need of community for addicts. And I had no idea what that looked like, and I ignored it for a while, and it happened over and over again. And after it happened a few times, I just got really weirded out and started praying about it, and just either take it away or tell me what to do, the next step, the next baby step. And so then in January, a group of ladies from church were going to see a movie, and so before the movie, Megan and I went to dinner. And if you don't know Megan, she is a lot like me, and she will tell you exactly what she thinks. And she will tell you that you're insane, or she will tell you good job, or so I told her about my dream and expecting and hoping for a you're insane. And she didn't. She immediately supported me. She told me that she would pray about it, and she told me she would keep it a secret. But she didn't. So about a week later, I went home one day, and I told Steve about the dream. I waited for multiple reasons. One is he's normally all in on any adventure, and so I told him about the dream, and he said, nope. He said, that's not going to happen because I don't want to relive the darkest time of my life, like Glenn said. And I should have gone to him first. But he came to fix the air here that day, and Chris was here actually working on sermon notes, and Steve talked to him and was like, listen to what craziness my wife just told me. And so Chris said, you got to be here Sunday. You have to be here Sunday. And that's all he said. Steve, Nick, and JP were actually on a ski trip that weekend, so they weren't going to be here. And I was actually in the nursery that weekend and wasn't going to be here. But God's funny like that. And my son, Wyatt, was the only baby in the room. And so Brooke Beam was back there working with me, and she graciously offered to let me go to the sermon. Came in, sat down, and then Megan shows up and sits right beside me. And that's not abnormal, but it was perfect that day because Chris started preaching. I immediately started trying to ignore him, and Megan kept hitting me. She kept elbowing me over and over again. She kept elbowing me, and I just left it at that and had no intention of saying anything to anybody else. And I was in line at nursery waiting to pick up my kids, and all of a sudden, Heather and Wimbo came running up to me and said, what was your dream? And then I will let Heather take it.
I'm Heather. I'm Glenn's wife. And so after Glenn came home from rehab, we almost immediately started talking about wanting to do something, to be a part of something, to give back, because we were just, we were so humbled by how many people loved on us and walked with us through our journey. But we were like, we need to give it some time, focus on his recovery, and then, 3 years go by and you just don't talk about it again. So I came to church on this infamous Sunday, and I didn't know anything about Les's dreams or anything at this point, but Chris was talking about the vision of the church and just different things, and he kind of issued a challenge to really listen, and if God was putting something on your heart, to send a text to somebody so that it will spark further conversation and hold you accountable for that. So I sent a text to Glenn about starting a recovery program, and I also sent a text to Laura Barano, just kind of saying something like, ask me when I have ever stepped out in faith. I knew she would lovingly hold me accountable to that. But our recovery journey was just, obviously there was, rehab and all those sorts of things, but there's no doubt, we came through this because of people that were willing to be the hands and feet of Jesus for us. As soon as I took that step and, went to Chris, it was like we suddenly had this army around us of people that were just willing to help. And, we're very blessed. We have a wonderful family who would try to help, but, addiction doesn't just affect us, it affects family. And so, they were struggling too and needed some space to heal. And so immediately, we had these people that, we knew them, but didn't really know them. They didn't know us. We had never done anything for them, but we just had these people that were willing to hold our hands and walk with us, and some days carry us through this. So, Megan.
Hey guys, I'm Megan, and I am John's wife, and there are a lot of you out there.
A lot more people
A lot
today
more than the
9
earlier
o'clock,
service.
It happens that way.
So I'm going to focus on the community part. When we started meeting after we kind of realized like God's definitely giving us something here and we need to run with it, we kept circling back to what was unique about our group and our experiences with addiction and recovery, and it was the community aspect. Whether it was when our husbands were gone to rehab, the people that had already gone through it before us, pointing us in the right direction of insurance purposes, or lining up childcare for you, or coming to cut your grass or feed your kids. But also afterwards, the accountability piece that these guys and these women were able to give us as we walked in the recovery part of addiction. And I think what is also unique about our group is we have these guys that obviously are recovering addicts that can speak to that part of someone who may be struggling with the same thing, but we also have spouses and friends who have walked in it that can speak to family members and spouses and kids and their perspective. But we are not qualified at all to do this. We are not professionals that have worked with addicts. But God is calling us into something, and so He is qualifying us to walk in community with others like we had. So,
I'm Wimberly. One of the things that I love to do is to support and encourage folks in what God's calling them to do, which is why Leslie didn't tell me initially. Because as soon as I heard what God was saying, let's do this, let's move. And I love also to see how God can bring healing in brokenness, and then offer that and extend that healing to others. Because none of this that they've been through will be wasted. So we started meeting and brainstorming, and, to have a program, we have to have a name. So, Les, tell us about the name.
So here I am again. when we were brainstorming about it, and we had talked that there was some bullet points that we needed, and one thing was a name. The next day, I was listening to the radio, and a song came on for King and Country called "Burn the Ships," and my mom had told me months earlier that it was about one of the people in the band. They were on tour, and his wife had surgery, and called him and said, "You got to come home because I'm addicted to these pain pills. I can't put them down." And in the song, it over and over again says, "Step into a new day." It was New Day Recovery.
So, yeah, so we had a name, but that's about all we knew. And so we did some research, kind of talking about, like, what do we want this to look like? What are we able to do? So I talked with Zach Dixon with Hopetown Counseling, and, I knew he would be a good support for the counseling piece. And then he introduced us to one of his good friends named Bradley, who runs the Bridge Center in Anderson, which is a recovery program that he started a couple years ago. And, my thought is, why reinvent the wheel? So we all met together, the 8 of us, with Zach, Bradley, and Walt. And one of the things, I was starting to feel really overwhelmed. Like, how are we going to be everything to everybody? Like, we don't have experience in detox, and, we can't be a rehab facility today, but what can we do? And so Bradley said, what you start today will look different a year from now. But God's just asking you to start, to be obedient and offer what you have. And what we have is community. That's what we can offer this community here in Fountain Inn, bringing our arms around people, either past addictions or active, and be that support system. But also be able to point them in a direction if they do need a 12-step program, or if they do need detox or rehab, and drive them there, or whatever we need to do to support them. And so that is kind of our hope and our dream as we start this program, which we do already have a date for our first meeting, which will be in September 13th at 6 o'clock here at Capstone. And really, all are welcome to join. But, if you know someone who struggled with addiction, in the past, or actively, or a spouse or a family member that needs support, we want to be there. We want to be there. And so we're stepping out in obedience, not knowing what's ahead, but knowing that God's going to do it, that He's going to break the chains, that He's going to change the hearts.
And one of the things, too, that you guys had mentioned a little bit, Megan, about some of the financial part of things, too, that, this is hard for a family financially. They're going to come alongside people financially as well. And if there are folks who might need help as they go to recovery, there's a tab on our giving if you want to start supporting. It's just recovery. You can give towards recovery, and it's going to go towards them. They're kind of collecting money to where if somebody comes to them and they need to go, but they don't think they can miss work, we're going to help, and because that's a big part of this whole thing too. So if you got any questions about that, you can let me know. Anything else y'all want to share? Megan, let's go.
Okay. We have created a Facebook page. So it's New Day Recovery, and you'll see our logo as the picture, and we'll be posting information about our meetings and other things that we want to share on there. So you guys go find us and like us and share it with anybody that you know that may need encouragement or struggling with addiction.
Oh, there's an email address. So if anybody has questions, message us on Facebook, or you can email us newday@capstonechurch.net.
Thank you, Nick, for making the T-shirts. There's some out there in the back. If y'all want to go buy one.
Yep, that'll help support the recovery thing too.
I want to say something. I just want to say that if there's somebody that's sitting here, or there's somebody that's watching online or watching this later, And you're thinking, you know, this is great that they have this great story that's worked out, but they just don't know what I've done, what it looks like for me. It's just impossible. I just want to encourage you that, you know, it may seem like there are just so many impossible obstacles in front of you that you could never conquer. But all you have to focus on is taking one step, and that step is just reaching out to somebody. It will probably be the hardest step that you take, but if you can do that and you can bring it into the light, then God can take all of those things that seem so impossible and make them possible. So.
Thank you guys for sharing. I know that was not easy, and I know that was very humbling. So you guys are awesome, and appreciate y'all being up here and being willing to be obedient again in this call. So thank you guys for that. As they have a seat, we're going to get the band to come back up, and as they come up, I feel like one of the things that is important was that response that we issued, that challenge that we issued back in January to respond. And so that's what we want to do now. So I think there's two responses. I think there's the response that you connected with these guys, that you're addicted to something. And like Glenn said, it doesn't have to be chemical or drugs or whatever. It's just something that you're putting above God. And so maybe today is your wake-up call. Maybe you're here today by chance, or maybe you're here because you always come here and you've been hiding. But maybe today's your day, your new day, to respond. And they want to help, and they want to help. Or you're sitting in here saying, you know, God told me I was supposed to do something, but I'm too scared to do it. I don't know how to respond in that call of to stepping out and starting something new. And so maybe that's your new day, is what God's telling you. It doesn't have to be to start a recovery program or move to Africa to be a missionary. Maybe it's starting a Bible study at your house that's going to be able to reach out to these guys and provide them community. Maybe it's starting a Bible study at your work. Maybe it's just talking to your neighbor. God's calling something, and there's a response that needs to happen. And if we don't respond, we're being disobedient. And what these guys all said, the first thing, the most important thing, is obedience. So that's a challenge. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much for the strength, the faith, the humility that these couples displayed for us all. But God, it is not about them. It is about you. It is about the power that you have in working in all of us to be able to have a new day, to be a new creation. So thank you for their testimony and for their kingdom story. God, if there's someone in here now who has some things that they need to get off their chest, God, I pray that they would respond. I pray that they would be real with you, and that they would take that next step. And God, if there's somebody here who needs to step out in faith and to start something, and there's being challenged, God, I pray that you would light a fire and don't let that go out until they respond in that as well. We thank you, God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.